A
That's
cow.
what you call it.
Yeah, you nailed it.
I mean, I think we can end the retro open hour on that note right there. It's not going to get any better than that.
I like how the recording started with you saying a cow.
A cow. Yeah. That's going to be good. Someone's going to go to YouTube later and it's going to start off, a cow. What? What's going on?
Moo. All right. Sorry for the delay here. Just making sure I've got the slide deck ready.
How's everybody doing?
Fantastic. I'm fired up with these cow jokes.
Awesome.
Are you
All
Googling
right.
more?
I feel like I could use more cow jokes.
Okay, welcome everybody. Janae, you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, give me 1 second. There's really bad feedback, so I'm gonna switch to my headphones.
Oh no.
Unless you can hear me okay. How grainy is it?
You actually sound fine to me.
Yeah. All right. Good deal. We'll just do that then. All right. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us on this lovely Thursday for Open Hour. I'm Janae Andrus, the SALT Community Manager, and we are
It does
really
sound like crap.
about today. What, Shane?
Oh. Does it
As
sound
you
bad?
started talking, it sounded worse and worse.
I'm telling you, it's not sounding good. I don't know what's up with this. But yeah, there's a weird thing going on with my computer. Can you hear the
That's pretty terrible.
Shane, she's using
What?
Windows.
What?
That's
No,
better?
that
That's
sounds
better.
better.
All right, good deal. we'll just start off rough here. Awesome. So welcome to Open Hour. We love the opportunity every week to connect with the community and answer your questions. And this week in particular, we're very excited to get into our retrospective later with CVE that Sage will guide us through. But first, let's dive into our agenda. So we're going to have some general updates as we do. We'll go over the release updates, packaging updates. There's not much there. SEPs we always touch on. We'll address some working groups, review those with you all, working groups and clinics. And we'll probably have a little Q&A, but really what we're going to do is probably dive into the retrospective at that point. So let's get right into it. General updates, we're really excited about this one. So this is a link to, and someone can throw that link into the chat as well. Netflix came out with a blog. They put a blog out talking about how they do things behind the scenes with Netflix. And there's a whole section in there about how they use salt and how it's just the best of the best, and it's why they chose it. So Netflix is salted, guys, and we're really excited about that. So that's pretty exciting if you guys want to check out that link. That was really fun for us to see. So yay. So every time you watch Netflix, you can just think of salt. That's pretty fun. We wanted to share that. And then next week we have our monthly virtual meetup. So Randy Thompson will be doing that for us. Randy's with GoDaddy, and he's one of our SALT champions. He's a really great member of our community. He's going to talk about Tiamat as well as several other things. That will be next Wednesday, March 17th at 5 p.m. Mountain. Keep in mind that we do virtual meetups every third Wednesday. So you can mark your calendars or just follow the community calendar, which we are really excited to make better. And we are actively working on that and making more strides. So we're very excited for that improvement. And also, getting into the release updates. Sage, do you want to talk about this one?
So yeah, so we're still set for the aluminum release for the general availability to be March 31st. The RC1 packages are available on repo, and looking for people to test those and give us some feedback. And looking forward to that. Then we will go over, this is the retrospective. So a retrospective is not a postmortem, and they're not congruent with each other. This is a place to give feedback, a place to talk about what went well, what didn't go well, and then actually form some action items. From that, that's a piece that needs to go into a root cause analysis and timelines, and that will come out with the retrospective artifacts that will come, and we can go over those next time. So just putting that in here as well. And then here is our timeline.
Perfect, thank you.
And then I think I actually took out some of the other slides to make room for the retro, so we could dive right into that. This is just a framework.
Perfect.
And so I also have this in an issue in the SALT repo. And we like to use these short words, start, stop, and continue, but we do say those as like a general, it gives you a good idea of what we're trying to look for. But this is action for change. And then stop, of course, is what isn't going well, and continue is something that probably is going well. And when we open up to a retrospective, what we're trying to gain from this is that the whole team, the community and the core team and everyone that's involved in that, whether you are a tech writer or a project manager or a QA or a community contributor, or if you've been leading out for a long time as an engineer, we want to hear from you about things that are start, stop, and continue, to give that just some short verbiage. And so let's just go ahead and get started.
Yeah, sounds great. Go ahead and dive right in, Sage, and walk us through it.
Yeah, so that's my intro. Does anybody want to start with something that is going well? You can either put it in the chat or you can speak up or cough it out.
I guess I should have been on mute for that.
It's okay. You know. So we can take from some things that we have already heard that are going well, and that is to hold retrospectives. I think that having a retrospective at the meeting and giving people some time to be heard is valuable and something we will continue to do. Something that's new that I haven't always done is to give an asynchronous way to give feedback. And so I opened up an issue in the SALT repo. I labeled it retro, and we'll take feedback there. I will likely put all the feedback that I get in that issue before closing out the retrospective and then putting that into a report. That's something that I think we will also continue and is valuable and is going well.
This is for the RC, right?
This is for the CVE.
Oh, the CVE.
CVE release.
So something that went well and that we should continue is, and that is of course from the SUSE point of view, is the early communication about the CVE and the in-sync release of the fixes.
Thank you. I think we've heard that throughout as well, that having some early communication has been quite good. We'll continue to do that. I think that we do need to continue to work on the website a little bit to make that more seamless, and we'll continue to work on that. I don't know what that looks like today exactly, but I have a few issues that surround some of that already out in the SALT repo that are for the community website, and we'll work towards those. But keeping that communication piece in the forefront, I think, is key and is going well.
That means you've gotten better, because last time it was, you didn't tell us, we didn't know. So we're getting better at this.
I think that we used to say nothing until we had a CVE release. So it felt very spontaneous. Right?
Yeah, that definitely got better, a lot better,
Yeah,
actually.
I think that's a lot better.
Yeah, and to ride on top of that too, that like what was said is the fact that we also have had early ongoing communication is also how we caught issues that would have been pretty much baked into the patches if we hadn't gone through kind of that extensive, hey, here's the initial notification that there's this upcoming CVE release, and people who were able to get early access who were partners or otherwise were able to then come back and say, but hey, we caught some things. So much better catching it that way than after the fact.
It might feel or seem trite, but I think it's important to call out the fact that, you know, fixing the CVEs is a thing that we're doing, and that's a, you know, I think we're doing that well. But yeah, there have been CVEs discovered, and that's not good. But the fact that we're fixing them, as opposed to just, you know, sticking our head in the sand and saying la 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 la, like, that's good. We should continue fixing problems.
Actually, too, and on with that, we've also, with Pedro's assistance too, in our test suite, have started to add more preventative measures with static code analysis into our tool chain, which as a result, we're wanting to pretty much roll out at least similar baseline tests across other SALT projects too. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's something that's fairly new, but it is something that we started through this CVE release cycle, which we haven't talked about timelines too much. This spans from September through January, the CVE release timeline. And so in that time, we did a lot of things. I will make note that since we're saying we're fixing these CVEs, how many we had, this is the largest CVE release that we've ever published. So it's quite large, and that is a risk in and of itself when there's so many to have higher risk with more, right? That happens. But we still were able to execute on that. And we were able to execute on that during a time that we were also acquired. And we lost 3 key people on our team, and 2 have been replaced. We're still waiting on that 3rd. So some other things out there that I think we still did a good job with the environment that we were working through. And I think that's something to be praised a little bit, to say, hey, we were doing all of this during a time that was not only a little bit uncertain and new for people, it was a longer timeline than usual, and it was a much larger release, and that increases that risk. But we did do it. We did fix those CVs, so that's good.
Is it worth, just for the community members' benefit, walking through kind of what the CV process looks like from, you know, the time you get notifications till the time you get a patch, like until the time you release a patch, just kind of some background on what kind of goes on behind the scenes?
I guess we can. The process is pretty simple. I think that we have it out there fairly well documented in the security MD file that that kind of walks it through, that is reporting it to security@saltstack.com. We then acknowledge that and validate what's happening. And then depending on what that is, kind of gives us our timeline. And then other things that are also happening within that. So if that is reported and we're already releasing, sort of like if something was reported today and we're already releasing right now for a major release. And usually with a major release, we usually have a bug fix release that follows that sort of a month later. So then that's sort of looking at the timeline from there. Now, if that were to happen, let's say when we already had a CVE that was reported, and let's say that it's maybe calling upon another CVE that has been reported previously that we haven't released. And so those are similar and we're already working in that code base, that timeline gets shorter. So that's not always the case. So we kind of take them one by one and look at those on how they fit into that timeline. But to dig into the workflow, I'd probably have to rely on Daniel Wozniak there. Daniel.
I heard my name.
If you wanted to dive into anything else about the CVE process behind the scenes, so we validate it and then we go fix it.
Essentially, what happens is people will submit a notification to us that they believe they found a security issue. One of the core team members will validate that issue. And if we see that it is indeed an issue, then we put it into our planning phase. So CVEs are high priority, but often there'll be several people already working on other high priority issues when we receive a security report. So we have to put it into planning and get an engineer assigned to fix it. Generally, what we do is we take the initial proof of concept that the person submitted and we create a test case, an automated test case in the test suite for that issue. And then we work on the fix. Depending on the issue, it could be an easy fix. Sometimes the fix is more involved, so it really just depends on what the issue is. And then so in the case of like this last CVE release, in the month of December, I think we had like 5 or 6 different notifications come into the security mailing list. So while we were already working on several issues, more came in, and so that gets into like the whole release planning phase of it. It's like we have a certain number of issues that we know about and we're working on, and then we have to decide, okay, like, are we going to do one release for all of these, or are we going to do multiple releases? Generally, during this time, we're in contact with the initial, the person that initially reported the issue, and staying in contact with them, letting them know the status of where we're at in the process of fixing it, when we believe we'll have a release ready to go.
And also in that kind of triage process too, of deciding whether something, hey, this warrants a CVE patch or not. There are times that when it doesn't, it shows that we have gaps in our documentation that need improvement. So it leads to different types of action items too.
Yeah, I was kind of curious around because I can't remember who it was that mentioned, you know, that you share with partners and you get some feedback from them, like kind of what the testing and release process looks like. And you know, I know we found out very late before the first attempted release that that there was an issue, and then it had to be pushed out. I was just trying to understand some kind of what that testing process. So you've got you know, you've got your CVE, you've got your proposed patch. You know, kind of where does it look like from there? Like I guess you send it out to you know, you do some testing internally. You also share it with some, you know, select partners, and then just kind of what that looks like, and maybe a little bit more insight on why the problem was found so late. Maybe something around there. I'm just trying to understand the general process.
Sure. So we do go through a regular release process for that follows that, like testing and staging and packaging, right? So all the packaging and then patch files and those are released with some priority to people. Usually in the past that's been customers. We're looking at that list as we are now been acquired by VMware, because this CVE happened kind of bridging those two timeframes. And so as we were acquired and we knew that we had this, we came forward and said, this has been our process in the past. So this is what we would like to follow with this one, since we're bridging timelines. And we were given that okay, although because of the extension that got a little messier. But that process was to give priority customers access about a few weeks earlier to do some testing as well, and then to go general availability with that communication sort of a bit later, but giving that notice prior to that, about 2 weeks notice of that the CV is coming, and then having it out.
We should note that enterprise customers receive early access to the release and patches.
Right.
So just a question on that, because it seems that on the days of the public release, there have certainly been in the past issues about, you know, getting the packages done on that day, almost like it's actually happening that day. Whereas obviously
the packages are always ready to go weeks in advance.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's why I just wanted to clarify, because obviously I've seen the packages from this sort of, you know, early access stuff.
Yeah.
So
what you might be recalling is in June, it was either May or June when we had the one release.
Yeah.
And we published the fact that we were doing a release, and the packages didn't come until like a few hours later. That was actually an issue with our repository, not with the packages.
Okay.
So essentially something happened in the repository to where when we went to sync the packages up to the repository, it had to go through and like redo the entire repo.
Yeah, all the files got their timestamps messed up, and so when we went to rsync, doing it based off the date, it rsynced everything.
Okay. So this time around, when there was a delay, that was simply because of I think there was a patch missed out of one package, was it? Or there was some issue?
This time, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
So, yeah. So what happened in this last release? So we got all the packages ready. They went through our testing, and then we handed off to another team, which tests the functionality with everything, you know, Salt related that integrates with the Salt Open project. So Salt Enterprise and all the different products. They found an issue at one point, and that delayed the release by I think like 2 weeks. They found that issue, and then we found like very like soon before we were going to release, I think it was the day that we were going to release, we noticed that there was a bad merge at one point into one of the branches. And we caught that, and that delayed the release that day by a few hours. So we had to go in and repackage one of the versions because of that.
Okay, thanks.
It should be noted that we're dealing with, you know, at any given time, we're dealing with 3 versions that we're packaging. And then I think this time it was like 10 or 12 different versions that we went back and patched for. And the amount of changes in this, because it was, you know, 8 to 10 CVEs touching lots of files within SALT, just the patches alone took a tremendous amount of effort and time.
Is the intention to carry on patching that far back? Because is it not? Yeah,
That's
yeah.
we're done with that.
Yeah, fair
That
enough.
was done as a courtesy because back in May, the severity of the issue that we released in May, you know, as you know, that was a very severe vulnerability, and so we felt the need to go back and patch at that point, and then people started expecting it, and so we continued to do it for the past 6 months. And but the burden is just too great on the team that we have here, so we've decided that we can't continue to do that.
I mean, that sounds totally reasonable, but maybe needs communicating, I guess, to the community before another issue comes up.
I believe
Sure.
that has been communicated, right, Sage?
Yeah, so in the CVE release, as we released it, it was at the top of the communication in the post, and in all the emails that went out. It probably needs to have another blog post and maybe even a Salt Air and a hacks episode. We probably need to get the communication out some more, and we have thought to do some of those other ones as well, and have a plan to continue to talk about that. I think also we need to make that more visible. That platform support page is a little bit hidden and a little bit vague. The OS support page is even more hidden and but less vague, although confusing. And we want to work on that communication piece as well, because we think that that is actually at the core of where there's some confusion happening. So we'll do what we did for the CVE release, and we'll continue to say that we will follow our policy, you know, for CVEs and support model. We'll also look at that support communication that's a little more static and update that as well. Make it more visible, probably put some links on the homepage, things like that. But yes, good comments. One of the things that I didn't go well, and don't think that we have to go in any order here. I am completely fluid, that I just want to call out that the day that we found out that there was a bad merge in the branch, we also had an open hour. It was a Thursday. So not only am I going to not do Thursdays as release GA days, this one, I think it was the last day that we could do. We've typically always done them on Wednesday, and we'll go back to that. But we will also, once we know that there's a problem, we will probably cancel the open hour, because that was actually hindering some of the communication to go out and made me hesitant, which was a mistake. And I shouldn't have done that. I should have communicated early and often and everything that I knew at the time, and I didn't do that. So in the future, that's what I'm going to do.
So one potential start thing, have you considered, and I realize there may be issues in terms of resourcing, in terms of engineers and so on, but have you considered whether you should be, or you could be looking at areas where there are, once you have a CVE issue, trying to examine proactively some of the areas where those CVEs occur, because obviously Salt SSH and Salt combined with the Salt API has had a number of issues over the last 2 years, and including some sort of similar ones over the last couple of CVEs. And I think the one in when was it, September last year, was an attempted fix to a previous CVE issue that had not actually fixed the issue. So have you considered, or do you think it would be viable to start proactively looking at
Yes.
areas where there has been a CVE, and are there either similar bugs or potential issues in those areas?
We do that. Resources, that's contingent on resources, but
Sure.
we do definitely do that.
Right. And so
I
something,
feel like maybe not last one, but the time before, I feel like one of the recent CVEs, I remember us doing that where, and Diwaz, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I remember you getting a report from somebody and saying, this is actually broader than they knew.
Yes.
And going on and expanding that fix so that it wasn't just that narrow little target, but actually, fixing the whole thing.
yeah. And so something that we've started doing is some static code analysis, like Derek talked about, and we'll continue that. We'll continue to look at some other tools that could give us not just so that the resources aren't just diving into the code base, but that we could have some tools that give us some information where we can go and dive in that maybe we haven't had reported. We also, in this CVE release, we actually found ourselves within SaltStack, of the 10, I want to say 4 we found by digging into those further. And that was very interesting, I think. And we're also looking at doing some other things to do some validation within the code base itself, making some hard dependencies or some libraries where we can figure that out. And that's also where I think we're looking at, like, the security working group, which hasn't quite got off the ground yet, but would love to continue that, to work on some of those other proof of concepts where we can do more validation and sanitization of inputs and things.
Yep. And another thing to note on this last one, one of the CVEs was around not validating SSL certificates. And it came in as a report for one module, but we were aware that there were lots of places in the code base where the same issue exists, and we took the time and went in and fixed all of the ones that we were aware of.
Yeah, I saw that. That was really good.
Yeah.
And on that too, and Pedro could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that with the introduction of the bandit tooling, that can see if that is the case on, because the other thing is that whenever a CVE like this happens, is then we go, okay, we need to now make sure all new PRs don't reintroduce it into an existing module. If we have over 500, if it's such a sprawling code base, a PR may totally introduce that same problem elsewhere, and that's where tools like Bandit coming into play, because Bandit also can take custom rule sets, but I mean, it's early stages of its introduction into the code base, but us wanting to catch that as early as possible due to it being actually now embedded in the pre-commit, so it's shifted as far left in the process, that kind of thing we're wanting to introduce more and more based on these kind of things.
So yeah. Could you introduce rule sets to Bandit that understood the Salt code base sufficiently to say, look for uses of command.run where people are using shell and things like that, where there's potential for
that one, probably, but there's going to be a lot, static code analysis is only going to be so good. It's not something that we can.
We also need to think about it in the PR review process.
Yeah, that's where I was going to head with this.
Yeah.
That is actually one of the areas where I feel like, even though I feel like we do a pretty good job today with our reviews, like the merge issue that we caught at the last the last minute that should have been caught in review, but it wasn't for whatever reason. So that's something where I feel like we need to revisit that like process, like even if we need to have like a checklist of things that we
Mhm.
publish somewhere of here's what we need to look for when we're going through a code review.
And you were going to say something there, Pedro, too? Unless it was maybe what?
Oh, basically, so the introduction of Bandit just skims of what is commonly found. And as it was correctly brought up, we have some command.run. And we also have some custom implementations of popen. So those are not yet caught. We can tell, we can teach Bandit how it can look for those. But again, it's also what Daniel said. Ultimately, our review process, which is way better now, should be seeing these and stuffing them on the PR stage.
Cool. Sounds good.
Another thing that I wanted to bring up for this retrospective is our automated tests and how changes that we've made in order to get better and go faster have actually introduced a few issues with this particular process of maintaining older branches and older versions. So last year, well, I guess it was 2018 or yes, 2019, I guess, is when we decided to yeah, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. In 2019, it might have been 2018, where we decided to go from maintaining 3 different branches at any given time to only maintaining 1 branch, and we switched from develop to master. So at that time, the reason why we started doing that, one of the reasons anyway, was that just maintaining the test suites for across all the different branches was a huge burden on the team. And we had gone for several years without really paying a lot of attention to failing tests. We got into a situation where the culture became, well, this one test is failing, but we know it's failing, so it's okay to release, and we'll go back and fix it at some other time. And it just sort of snowballed into this situation where if you went and looked at the tests at any given time, there would be a ton of failures. And when people would ask, oh, well, why is this failing? The culture was such that we were saying, oh, well, we know about that. Like we're going to fix it at some point. And it wasn't a huge priority to make sure that the tests were passing at any given time. So in order to get to the point where we had a reliable test suite that was running and passing the majority of the time, rather than the majority of time failing, that's like the reason why we said, okay, like let's rethink this. Like if we go to 1 branch and we focus our efforts on that branch and making sure that we tackle the technical debt that we have of all these failing and flaky tests, that will help us out and to get to the state to where we have a reliable test suite. So we spent like several months as the core team focused just on going back and fixing all of those tests. And we ended up at a place where we had the master branch and we had a reliable test suite. So we ended up changing our stance on the older branches. But what happened with that is not only did we stop supporting and merging changes into those older branches, but we stopped testing those older branches. And that put us in a situation to where we, when we have these CVEs, we didn't have a reliable test suite on those older branches. We were able to get away in the September timeframe. We were able to get away with not really relying on the automated tests for those releases, relying on manual testing. But when we got in the situation where we had 10 CVEs and we were touching lots and lots of files and salt, those automated tests became more important, but they were not reliable for us. So that's a fairly significant issue that we identified, and we've started taking the measures needed to fix that.
Is work still ongoing on making sure like tests are flaky? Like I can tell you, like for example, the macOS Mojave test is pretty flaky, and the FreeBSD and a couple of the older Ubuntu ones I see are pretty flaky, like the 1604 test.
So one of the things there is tests were very reliable. In the past year, they were pretty reliable. But when we switched to PyTest, which happened in December, we switched to our automated tests from our old test runner, our old custom test runner. We switched to PyTest, and that introduced quite a bit of flakiness, which we've been working on resolving. And we're definitely aware of those. We have issues for them. You should be able to find issues in GitHub for any of those. FreeBSD is a newer platform that we started the automated tests on, so that's part of that one. But the macOS one is related to us changing to PyTest.
Okay, great.
And our process there is to create a ticket and then get it assigned out and get that fixed. Barney even gave us a ticket and we are working it. And I think it's great. I put in a PR to update the template so that there is a test failure template for an issue. And we'll continue to use those and continue to fix those. We have a flaky decorator, we did. And trying to work on those flaky tests throughout as well and make those more of a priority, kind of like tech debt. It's something that we're continually working on and trying to make sure that we've got that resolved. Getting the test suite to green was something that was not a priority, as Daniel said, and now we really try to make that more of a priority. We're in a little bit of a limbo with PyTest, and so we are looking at getting back to green and making that more solid. With PyTest, we knew that was a risk, but we were willing to take it because of the gains that we had with it.
Something that should be noted with the PyTest stuff is that this, PyTest, moving to PyTest has been a several year journey. And Pedro has been working on it. I think that was his only priority essentially for the last year or near a year. Maybe
I was going to say over.
I don't know.
Over a year.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
But it's been a while. And we finally got it to the point where we were running both. Like we had both the run test and PyTest running for several months. And PyTest got to the point where it was looking pretty good. We knew there was going to be some things that we were going to have to tackle, but we just got into this situation where we were at the very beginning of a release cycle, and we decided like, hey, like if we don't do it now, we may never do it. So let's just go ahead and do it.
And as we look at we did split up this week, the release and test working groups to make them two. Combining them at the time made sense, but now I think that it makes more sense now to divide them up. And we have enough work on just tests alone, and converting things over to PyTest, and then also getting that well used within the community, has enough work along with the test clinics to make it its own work group. That doesn't have a captain yet, and but it has plenty of work, and we'd love to start hammering out what that looks like and some of the goals to get those to be better. I don't know when that group's going to meet. I'm going to look at that this week, but that is also an initiative that we want to put forth with the community and get community involvement in.
Speaking of FreeBSD, I think it was Mike that mentioned something on the GitHub issue about the coordination with OS vendors. I know that Price and David are taking care of the packages in Fedora, and the SUSE manager team is taking care of the packages in OpenSUSE. But I don't know how this looks like for the rest of the distributions and the other OSs out there. Yeah, if there isn't already a workflow in place, I think it would be nice to have one to get the packages out as soon as the embargo is over.
Yes, so this, we did identify this as an issue in August of last year. However, we haven't necessarily implemented a full-fledged plan of how we're going to manage this. It is on our radar, but it's just something that we haven't had the resources to tackle yet.
Okay.
We were lucky in the last release that like one of the reporters of the CVE was a maintainer for OpenBSD, so that was a built-in
That's good.
built-in thing there. But yeah, we definitely need to get better in that area.
If you need additional input, I can give some.
We're always willing to take input.
Cool.
I mean, a big thing there is, frankly, input is one thing, but actually helping is another. So input's great. We love input, but even more than input, if someone can input some cycles of effort into things, that's even better.
And as we look at that security working group, that may be the place to look at that. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe it's goes somewhere else, but I think that we could insert that into a working group that we either already have existing or maybe even a temporary one, just to hammer that workflow out and really make it succinct and easy to understand and to use. I'd even love to put some automation around that if we can, and really dive into some good documentation for it. I don't know what that looks like exactly or where that's going to live. There's some things up in the air about where things are being published, and I'd like to be able to iterate on it faster than within the SALT code base, and I don't know that it fits there, so I think it needs to be somewhere else.
And another thing I'd like to point out is we do have a really great community with a lot of very active members that we appreciate very much, and we are trying to come up with ways that the people in the community that are very active and have helped us a lot, how we can involve them more in our processes and get them more involved in sort like a lot of the behind the scenes, like things that are typically behind the scenes. So security releases are one of them, where we're working. This is sort of a newer initiative. It goes along with the community advisory board and everything, but we're going to be working in the next few months to try to get people more involved.
Yeah, that's good. And yeah, I think this could be also a shared effort between the release and the security working group, because it kind of concerns both of the groups. And yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So testing, release, security, those three things overlap quite a bit. So, you know,
Yeah.
maybe it would be like if, you know, we have 3 separate working groups, but we could have them all meet in the same place at some point in time, once a quarter or something like that. It could be helpful.
Yeah, I was going to say, sounds like we need a group of groups.
Right, or a scrum of scrums or something. Yeah, and I think that probably needs to happen, especially with I think that also needs to happen with formulas today, and I would like to see something like that. I think our initial action that we thought we would take there is to open it up to, we have a weekly Friday meeting, and we would start opening that up to the working group captains to get that sync there. But we're open to other ideas. Maybe it needs to be a separate meeting. We can look at that with those captains and go from there. Speaking of the CAB, I did ask for people that are interested to join the CAB as members. I haven't really heard from anybody, which is interesting. And I do think that time commitment is interesting. And as we look at a security working group, something that was some feedback that was given, talked about priority for community members that could be vetted in some way. And that's a little bit different than a CAB. That would be more like active community members that we have a relationship with, that we can start talking about security, and we can, just like what Daniel's talking about. And I'm not sure what that's called today, but that's something that I think we need to move on. And it's sort of like, Janae and I were talking about it, and we joked that we might call them the pillars of the community, because we love to play on that SALT word, and we think that a lot of the people here are those people, and we want to expose that more and give more access and give more insight to what we're doing, and to get people what they need to.
Yep. I think essentially where we're at right now with the whole CAB thing is we don't know. We're not convinced that the CAB is going to provide the value, that there might be other ways that we can get people that are interested in helping us more involved in the process without needing this idea of the CAB. Would you agree, Sage?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there are people on this call who we plan to reach out to soon about all of this.
Yeah, you have kind of seen it. We talked about last time about triage and giving people some triage access. And I did invite a few people to that towards, and I'm looking at a date soon, a triage jam that may be an hour or two, and we'll go through the triage process and hammer that out. We'll be looking at a few of the key people that have started with that, to then move forward with, okay, so what does that look like in the future, and where are the holes today? And I think we're getting there. We wanted to do that sooner, and there were a lot of things that we just couldn't get around until recently, but we are making progress there. And I think that's to be noted. It didn't happen fast, but at least it happened. So that's good.
So Sage, you mentioned that this last CVE release was essentially sticking with the existing sort of salt stacking process, but that essentially is going to be the last one that sticks with that process. is the new process going to be defined by VMware in some way, or is it going to be the case that, you know, SALT project comes up with a new process for how this is going to work that then, you know, gets okayed by VMware, or how do you know how that's going to look?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's some key pieces that will change because of the acquisition, but they will not dictate a policy to us. In fact, what I've been finding is that our policy and process around security and CVE fixes and releases is much more robust than what they have for the rest of their open source. And so we may be bleeding out on that. But we do have a few things that will just sort of change a little bit because of the nature of the acquisition. And that's all for the better, I believe. And we have a few ideas that we've been thinking about to also make it more robust that we would like to really put out there as here's some ideas and here's some things that we think, and we'd love to share that with the security working group and make that more public too, and then make some decisions on how that can become actionable and visible.
Yeah, I think there's two things that I want to touch on with that. The first being that there is a very clear distinction at VMware between what's open and what's not. And so the processes for open are completely different than the processes for VMware products. The second thing is that for me, what I think the main thing that's changes with the acquisition when it comes to the SALT project is that we have now a lot more resources that we can leverage from VMware. One example is VMware has an entire team of security experts that we can now start to work with and leverage their expertise to help us make our processes and our fixes and everything else better. One example of that is just assigning CVE IDs, right? So previously we went through MITRE and we got the CVEs assigned, but VMware, they're already a certified, I forget the terminology right now, but they have a
CNA,
CNA.
Numbering.
Yeah, they're a CNA, so they have a block of CVEs, so we don't have to go through MITRE to assign CVEs. They can help us with risk scoring and everything up front. So that's of tremendous value. And I think there's probably a lot of other areas, not just security related, where we'll find as time goes on, where we can leverage the vast resources that VMware has to help the SALT project. And VMware is completely committed to helping the SALT project and supporting the SALT project and making sure that we're successful. And from what we're hearing, like, they want to use our model for their other open source initiatives. So that's really great. And we're super happy at this point with the whole thing. So it's great.
Right. Some of the things that they've seen, just to dive into it a little bit, is that they haven't seen that people even have a process for open source necessarily, that it's either not really thought about too much or it's just not in place at all. And so as they've taken on some of these open source projects that don't have anything, they don't even know where to start. And so if you have nothing, to even have something is better, right? But then we also have some experience to draw upon where we can go to some of these other projects and say, hey, well, this is what we're doing and this is what's been working for us, but we'd love to know where you think you have pain points. So that only helps us to grow. And I think that's touching on what Daniel's saying about having access to the whole security team within VMware and being able to talk with them through what is it that we're seeing? Why are we fixing it this way? What is this risk assessment? It's just completely amazing to have that resource at our hands. And we are just thrilled to have it. So we hope that we can also infiltrate that in other open source projects as well, how they could get involved in something like that. Because most of them are just like us. They're sponsored by VMware open source projects or part of that, fold.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of really great open source resources and people within the VMware team who are brilliant at what they do. It's just, it's a smaller community within VMware for sure. And we're really excited to connect with them and grow that even stronger within VMware. And like Daniel said, they really support what we're doing and give us the autonomy to do it well, and just empower us to do it even better. So we're very excited about that. And I really appreciate everybody's participation on this today, and Sage, of course, with all your brilliance. So we appreciate it, and we are really grateful for the opportunity to find areas where we can improve, because we always want to be improving and getting better for all of you. So we're at the top of the hour, so we will wrap up, but I want to thank everyone and have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.
Yes, if we didn't get to a topic that you would like to cover, please put it in the issue, and everybody have a happy Thursday.
Absolutely. Thanks all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.